Detroit, creating apps to share Detroit's ethnic heritage. I'm going to only read this list of speakers once.
Read it backwards.
I hope I get it right. I mean, it's Sangeetha Gopalkrishnan, Alina Klin. Is she?
She's not here.
But she's still going to participate.
Okay, all right. Laura Klein, Julie Kohler, did I say that right? Kaler, Julie Kaler, Misha Lucht, and Krista Rosinski. All right, they are all going to participate in this talk, and I'm delighted that this group has taken up the invitation of the Humanities Center not only to meet among themselves and to do the wonderful work they do interdisciplinarily, but to sign up for a Bloomberg talk. I have to remind other groups that this is something that is expected. And so we're very pleased that they're doing that. And they're all talented members of the Wayne State University professorate here, professorate. Sangeetha is director of the Foreign Languages Technology Center. Her research interests are technology integration at academic institutions, particularly online learning, and the role of leadership. She recently completed her doctoral studies here at Wayne State University. She identified best practices and leadership strategies for implementing successful online programs, and she has participated in at least 3 other Bloomberg talks and have been a member of working groups. So she is a friend of the Humanities Center. Alina Klin is a senior lecturer in the CMLC department teaching Polish, and she's been at Wayne State University for 19 years, since she was 5. And she was awarded the Polish Academy of Sciences Award in 1981. Also, she was awarded by the Polish government the Golden Cross of Merit in 2000. And she was awarded the Wayne State University College of Liberal Arts Excellence of Teaching Award. Laura Klein is a senior lecturer in the CMLC department teaching Russian. She has been here teaching at Wayne for 11 years since she was 4. And was awarded the Wayne State University Liberal Arts Science Teaching Award in 2006 and the President's Award for Excellence in Teaching in 2011. Wonderful, wonderful. Julie Kaler is a graduate teaching assistant in the CMLC department. Her department is German and Slavic Studies, and she's been awarded the Kulan Teaching Award. And I was the person who invented the Teaching Award. So I am so pleased that you are a recipient of it. This is in another life when I was an associate dean of the graduate school. And she's been also awarded the Rosalind and Marvin Schindler Excellence in Teaching. And Felicia Lucht is an assistant professor in the CMLC department teaching German and basic German language courses. Her research areas are German American studies and sociolinguistics. Go sociolinguistics. One of her publications is a co-authored article entitled "A Tale of Three Cities: Urban Russian Asymmetries in Language Shift," published in 2011 by the Journal of Germanic Linguistics, published in Cambridge. She's also a resident scholar in the Humanities Center program. and a very, very good citizen. She participates very enthusiastically in all of our round tables, and I think this is her second Brenda talk. I don't know if she did one before. Yes. And Krista Rozuski is an assistant professor in the Department of Anthropology. She's also an anthropological archaeologist conducting work in North America and the Caribbean. Have you been to Guyana yet? Okay. Currently she's working on 3 projects, including the survey and landscape archaeology on Montserrat project, the volcanic natural disaster, and the 3D neuron imaging research at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Krista and her SLAM project, a colleague John F. Cherry and Thomas P. Leopard, have recently published an article entitled Multi-Period Landscape Survey Results and Site Risk Assessment on Montserrat, West Indies, in the top-ranked Journal of Island and Coastal Archaeology. So you get the picture that we are here in the presence of wonderful teachers and distinguished scholars who are going to talk to us about an exciting project they're collaboratively doing on layers of Detroit, creating apps to share Detroit's ethnic heritage. And they had asked me not to have a long introduction. I just can't resist it. I took up 10 minutes of their time and we'll be able to get that back at the end. So welcome them to the class.
On behalf of the group, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out today, despite our lovely spring weather that we're having. And we're very excited to share our project with you. We are all too familiar with the usual depiction of Detroit in popular media and all the references to a city in decay, an abandoned city, and a city in ruins. And this common view of Detroit is exemplified quite often in this iconic image, the Michigan Central Station in Corktown, once grand but since has been transformed into the unwitting poster child for urban blight. In their beautifully haunting Ruins of Detroit series, which is accessible online and from which this photo originates, photographers Yves Marchand and Romain Meffre offer a statement about their photos, explaining that ruins are the visible symbols and landmarks of our societies and their changes, small pieces of history in suspension. The state of ruin is essentially a temporary situation that happens at some point, the volatile result of change of era and the fall of empires. This fragility, the time elapsed but even so running fast, lead us to watch them one very last time, being dismayed or admire, making us wondering about the permanence of things. Photography appealed to us as a modest way to keep up a little bit of this ephemeral state. So capturing these ephemeral moments, pictures such as these are indeed worth more than 1,000 words. But without additional context, viewers unfortunately often walk away with a limited understanding of Detroit's story, focusing on Detroit's financial woes and the aforementioned themes of decay, abandonment, and ruin. But these stories and the story of Detroit have complex, multiple layers. Urban decay is one of them. But what is far too often overlooked are the stories of life in the city and the rich history behind these images and the communities from which these images are taken, such as the dynamic history of Corktown. So it's the goal of our project to start peeling away these different layers to document and share the story of Metro Detroit's vibrant cultural and ethnic groups. Despite my attentions, I would not be able to possibly adequately summarize 312 years of ethnic cultures that Detroit has experienced. And while this Wordle graphic is not comprehensive, it does give us an idea of the extent of diversity that has historically existed and continues to exist in the Metro Detroit area. So originally home to Native American groups, including the Ojibwe, also called Chippewa, Ottawa, Potawatomi, Huron, and Miami. The area we now know as Metro Detroit grew from French, then British military outpost to an emerging commercial center to a leader in the auto industry. And in addition to migration from within the United States, Detroit has also received many immigrants from all over the globe. And each of these cultures have contributed in very unique and different ways to the history of Detroit, and that's something we are going to start documenting in our project. And before we talk about our project, Julie Kaler is going to talk about a model that has inspired us and informed the direction we're taking for our work. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Right, so the model, the project that gave us the idea for our project is a project called German Traces. And this is a Goethe Institute project. They created actually a couple of different apps. We'll talk about two of them that trace German histories in cities and countries around the world. This is a sampling of some of the cities in the US and internationally. In particular, they're trying to show German histories that are now lost. So for instance, we don't necessarily maybe think of Israel as having a lot of German traces, but they have, for instance, a cemetery there from the World War I period of German soldiers. So things that they're traces, or they're not there anymore, so that we can reveal. And this reminded us of some of the places and the histories of Detroit that maybe we don't have access to anymore in the physical. So the way that each of these programs works, especially the international ones, which are a little bit different from the US, is there's a map of locations, usually tourist sort of locations, and the user at each site, they can geolocate, so they can hold up their phone or their tablet and it'll tell them if they're in the area of one of these sites. And they can read about the location, see historical photos, and listen to oral histories in German and also in the language of the area. So in the US, they're also in English. In Israel, they're also in Hebrew, and so forth. For right now, I'd like to look at the example of Israel's program. So we're going to hand out some iPads, and I'm also going to demonstrate up here with a projector. If you don't get an iPad and you can't look on with your neighbor, just please share up
Can we
here.
take these home with us?
Yeah. Yes, you have to keep these.
You can't go
Party
past
favorites.
Guard bound, so would you like one? Would you like it?
Sound.
No?
And they're coming to Humanities Center.
Would you guys like one? Sure. Wash.
Okay. So if you're looking at your iPad out there, if you could slide over to the next screen, you'll see German Traces is this green item. Actually, I'll do that again because that went really fast. This green one right here in the bottom right. And mine's already set on Israel, but yours might look like this. So you had an option of a couple locations. And I just want to show you sort of what it looks like. So I'm looking at a map here of Israel. Each of these little tabs is a location I could look at. I didn't turn on the geolocation because it would say, you're not in Israel. If we were in Israel and we were driving around, we might be able to see which one was closest to us and get there. So I can take a look. Here's a picture. Here's a nice summary of the location and its history. And here's a report in German and a report in Hebrew for us to listen to. I don't know if we can even hear it. Oh, yeah.
400 Meter unterhalb des Meeresspiegels in einer einzigartigen Landschaft aus Stein.
So just an idea. I'm not going to listen to the whole thing. And then what I think is also very interesting is that they have some related links with more information. So if you're interested in learning more, you have the opportunity to increase your knowledge there at the bottom. So that's one example of how it's used in the Israel program. Now, there's also the New York and the Toronto programs run a little bit differently. They use an augmented reality program called Layer. And we're going to talk about how we want to use that program, because the problem with this, when we think about Detroit, is that all these places are there. They're like tourist sites. You can go and you can walk around. Some of the places we want to talk about in Detroit maybe burned down in the fires of the 19th century, or maybe there's a building there and there's just one square, brick that has a date that's important. So it's not like we can have people just walk around and see and provide the information. We also need to provide a visual. So that's why we're focused on instead the German Traces New York City. So I'm gonna revert back, I'm sorry, to this screen. Do you have the iPads? We're gonna leave them out there. If you wanna be looking at some of these sites while I'm talking, please feel free. Also, the app I'm about to talk about, Layer, is also on your iPad. So if you have an iPad and you wanna look at Layer, that's also something you could do. Okay, great. So the German New York City German Traces uses Layer, which is an augmented reality app. And we're going to talk real briefly about what is augmented reality. So augmented reality is any system where you might hold up your phone or your tablet and see on the image, so this is the image of the street I'm looking at, I would see it augmented with information here, information about businesses in the area that I could go to. So if I was looking down this street, I would not only see the street, but I would also see information about each of these places. And there's lots of different ways that we can use augmented reality. And I was just going to briefly talk about a couple of ways that it's being used. It's a very interesting in new media. So one thing that's happening is this item, Word Lens. We'll ignore the sound. But Word Lens is really cool because it translates text right in front of you. So, one second, sorry.
It's behind it.
It's behind it, yeah. There it is. Ah. So you see the text is being held up in Spanish and translated into English pretty neatly in our augmented reality. As a language teacher, of course, this makes me a little bit nervous, but still a very interesting use of the product. Okay, and then we have Layer itself. So Layer is the program that is being used in German Traces, but it's also a platform. We'll just listen to a couple seconds of this.
Layer is
Sorry.
bringing augmented reality is a completely. Layer is a platform where everybody can create their own fantastic augmented reality experiences.
Augmented reality is a new mass media. It's where the real world is combined with digital information.
I'm just going to pause it here.
We're going to break.
You can see this is an image in which you might hold up your tablet and see where your check-in time is at your hotel, see that there's a sale happening over here, see when you can catch the ferry over here. So that information will be available to you while you looked at the real world.
These digital experiences into reality. And you're going to engage into reality with this new medium. Today, with Layer, you can experience history, art, ATM finder, real estate for sale, how things looked 10 years ago, 15
This
years
is
ago.
really neat. So we're looking at this street,
Foursquare, Twitter, tourism.
looking at a road, a moving picture going down this street, what, 60, 70, I don't know how many years ago. So that's something you can do, and there are apps available for that through Layer, like in Berlin, where we have a lot of documentation of when the city was younger in film. Okay, so that is Layer, and for the sake of time, I'm actually going to skip my last example. The last example I'll just tell you is 3D books. It's a book, and if you hold it up to your tablet camera, it will look as if you're holding a 3D image, which you can then tilt and manipulate. Okay, so those are some really interesting examples of how augmented reality is being used. The way that we're using it in German Traces, you see this is an example of what you would see on the screen of German Traces New York. Here's a building, here's a picture of that same building made to match up to it, so many years before, maybe 50 years before. And then here's some information down here. If you click on this, you can have more information in both German and English, and listen to it in German and English as well. And I should say we got the idea for working on this project together at an FLTC brown bag that I presented about iPads and apps. When I mentioned this, I guess Felicia and Sangeetha and Laura were all there. And we started talking about what if we did something like that in Detroit. Okay, but like I said, Detroit's a little bit different. So it's hard to do an Israel-German traces because we don't actually have always the standing structure. But also Detroit's ethnic communities move and change very quickly. So what was Germantown is now Greektown. What we've known as Polish Hamtramck for a long while now is starting to become something called Bangalatown, which is a Bangladeshi neighborhood. So we feel by using augmented reality, we can represent the past that might not be there, that is there perhaps in Israel, but not here in Detroit. Show things that are hidden, things that are maybe something new has been built there, or maybe it's in ruins, so of course not everything will be in ruins. And instead of just focusing on German roots, especially in a city of Detroit that's so complex, it would just paint a very incomplete picture. It'd be hard to be talking about the German traces of Greektown without mentioning that this is not Greektown, so that there's another culture that's moved in and put their own mark on everything. So we'd like to create a map similar to German traces in New York City, in that it uses augmented reality. But we want to include all the ethnic histories. We're starting with German, Polish, and Russian, and we're hoping to make a template that then could be expanded on by lots of different, maybe local groups or other university projects in the future. Okay. And our audience, speaking of that, will be some of those local historical groups or local cultural groups, like the Carpathia Club in German that's very active and might want to have access to this information about German history, as well as residence history, our own students here at Wayne State, especially in language history, anthropology, and urban studies, and visitors and those who are new to Detroit. One of my favorite things about Detroit is that everything that's cool is hidden. The best restaurant is not necessarily under a big marquee. Of course, that makes it hard when you're new to Detroit, so this is going to unlock some of those hidden places for our visitors. Now I will hand this off to Krista.
Right. So I'm going to introduce the structure of our pilot study, and then we're going to segue into a few of the examples that we've identified and we'll be conducting research on for our pilot. And so far we don't have anything augmented to show you, but I'll introduce you to some of the pieces of what we're starting to assemble together. So, as Julie said, our focus right now is on the German, Russian, and Polish communities of Detroit. And we came up with these three areas, these three ethnic groups, because they intersect with a lot of our own interests and my colleagues' language experience here in teaching at Wayne State. So since September, even before the working group was formally established, we've been brainstorming about how to package the pilot study and what sort of locations would make for a feasible, logistically relatively uncomplicated and accessible route through which visitors could engage with these various sites. So we've narrowed our focus down to the downtown neighborhood of Detroit for the first pass. And within downtown, we've been brainstorming ideas based on different places that we're familiar with, or scenes or buildings that intersect with, for example, a Polish war hero, or the longest standing bar established by German immigrants in Detroit, and you'll see some others. So this concentric circle theme is throughout. I think Laura's going to talk more about that later, but you alluded to that too. So starting in a very small, manageable area and building out in both time and space from there. So the first story, when we were trying to make sense of these different places that we'd brainstormed and we'd identified in the first pass, we were trying to group them thematically. And right now where we're at is that we came up with some examples that represent kind of good moral behavior of these communities in Detroit, some that represent bad behavior, illicit activities, and some spaces or buildings that have really encountered through abandonment or loss or destruction some of the uglier sides of history of the city. So I will introduce to you the bad of the good, bad, and ugly triad. And so here's one of the first places we'll be looking at. This is a building, this is 4th Street here and 3rd Street here, downtown, the Joe Louis Arena is just down the street from here. And you can see it's very close to the waterfront. This building is called Tommy's Bar and Grill today. Have any of you guys ever been there on the way to a hockey game? Well, I don't know if you knew it, but you were sitting in what is a speakeasy run by the Purple Gang during Prohibition, actually before Prohibition, from about 1917 to 1933. And the Purple Gang are notorious for many different reasons. They're a group of bootleggers who were bringing whiskey over underground from Canada and supplying it to Al Capone and his cronies in Chicago. But they're also significant in the scope of our project because they were a gang of Russian and Polish immigrants. They were Jewish, most of them were Jewish, but they were first and second generation Russian and Polish immigrants. And unlike every other city, every other major city during Prohibition, New York, Boston, Chicago, Detroit was the only place where one single ethnic criminal organization controlled all of the underworld of the city. So these guys were immensely powerful and influential. So we arrived at this location through a partnership that we recently established, my students and I, with Preservation Detroit, which is a nonprofit preservation agency just down the street here. So that collaboration is now spilling over into this group, and hopefully the results will be really productive. The Purple Gang, it has a nickname that's called the 3rd Avenue Navy, which has to do with their shuttling and ferrying activities underground here. And I never really knew what that meant until we came here to Tommy's Bar, which is really the only building standing on that side of the street. So we got really excited when we found that association. And incidentally, this is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, standing business building in Detroit today. It was erected around 1840. And figuring that history out is part of our exercise in doing the research and assembling the temporal layers over time. So this is just one example of the type of information that will go into our layers. This is a fire insurance map, a Sanborn map from 1897, and the yellow highlights the location of Tommy's Bar today before the front was built on. So these sort of maps, which exist every 10 years or so, provide us with almost forensic clues to the building and its construction over time and modification into a bar. It wasn't always a bar, as you can see. Now, all of the places that we've chosen happen to be public buildings. They're spaces that we can go inside of and experience from the inside as well as the outside. And a lot of the German traces examples have focused mainly on the outside of buildings. So we hope to bring to bear more of a three-dimensional inside-out aspect to our app. And here at Tommy's Bar, this is going to be possible because this summer we're going to go into the basement of Tommy's Bar, where this alleged speakeasy was, and image through 3D photography and mapping the different structures that existed down there. And there are all sorts of traces or ghosts of past building activities here that were associated with the Purple Gang. There's bricked up windows, deposits under stairs, which probably have tons of historic artifacts in them, kind of false walls that have been built up. You can see on the top there, a little entryway. And best of all, a secret tunnel system that goes under 3rd Street, and it's bricked up at the end. This is it here. And quite possibly, it goes in the direction of the river. We don't know if it goes there. We'll find out this summer. But this is the sort of information that we'll be building into the app itself. So visitors to the bar, sitting upstairs, can query this and queue it up on their phone. And although they might not be able to go spelunking in the tunnels below, they can get this sort of information just by sitting and enjoying a pint, I suppose. So this represents kind of the bad history of Detroit in terms of the Polish and Russian communities, and we don't know to what extent the Germans were involved here as well. They may well have been, because many of the industries that were taking place around the current Tommy's Bar building at the time were run by Germans. So we'll get to this summer. Any of you guys who are students here who might be interested in participating, talk to us afterwards. And so, moving on to the good.
The good, that's
Yes.
right. So I teach Russian literature and culture, and so I will be showing a few samples of some of the many local sites that are related to Russia and Russian culture in the area. The first one is Holy Trinity Russian Orthodox Church, which is right on the border between Detroit and Hamtramck on Carpenter Street. There are a number of Russian churches in the area. In fact, there are other Holy Trinity Russian churches in the area, and there is even a Russian monastery in the area. But I chose this church to focus on because it has its own very unique history that leads through Pennsylvania, through Poland, and back to Russia. In the 17th century in Russia, there was a schism between the official Russian Orthodox Church and a group of people who protested the reforms that it was introducing. It believed that any change to the traditions in the church was heretical, and so they refused to accept it. In response, the Russian church, along with the Russian government, persecuted these people, who are called Old Believers, for centuries. From the 17th century all the way through into the Stalinist period in the 20th century, they were persecuted. So it's not surprising that a large number of them fled the country, and the group that we're interested in here went to Poland, and then in the mid-19th century they started coming over to the United States. They ended up in Erie, Pennsylvania. And then during the Depression, they started coming to Detroit for jobs. And they ended up in the area of Hamtramck in Detroit. There were a number of them living there, and they decided that they needed a church. And they started building this in 1935. They didn't have very much money, so it took them until 1949 to construct it. But they finally did do that, and it stands to the present day. Now, Old Believers are very interesting. They are a very closed community. They're similar in many ways, I would say, to the Amish, Russian version of the Amish. This is a group of Old Believers in Russia today. I don't have very many pictures of the ones here right now because they're very closed. And in fact, I'm getting permission through a researcher to be able to use the information on them, getting their agreement, because they're not very open. To the present day, they dress the way they did pretty much back in the 17th century. The men wear beards to show that they have a special relationship with God. Shave your beard, you cut your relationship with God in the Old Believer religion. Contemporary Russian Orthodox men in the official church often do not have beards. So this is a glimpse into really the 17th century Russia that's around the corner from us. All the way through Poland and Erie, Pennsylvania, and until this group came to Detroit, they preserved their culture, language, and traditions pretty much intact. Unfortunately, the community is dwindling at this point. They have pretty much lost Russian by all accounts, and eventually this may only become a trace, but we will have captured it in our project here. Not only are immigrants going to be the focus of our interest in our studies here, but also other interactions between the Russian and other ethnic communities and the Detroit area. One of them is another little-known bit of history from World War II, American history. There were a group of American soldiers sent to Russia at the very end of World War I. They were sent in with some British and French soldiers in order to fight the Bolsheviks, the communists in Russia, who had dropped out of the war against Germany, and then we kind of stayed there and involved ourselves in their civil war for a little while. It was completely unsuccessful, and in 1919 we brought our men back. They named themselves the Polar Bears, hence they are known as the Polar Bears. And so one of the sites that I will be investigating is Belle Isle, which is where their July 4th, 1919 Welcome Home celebration took place. And then going in circles outside of the center, we can also look at Whitechapel Cemetery in Troy, which is where they have their monument. You might have seen this as you were driving past on 75. See the big polar bear monument there. And every Memorial Day, they commemorate the soldiers who died in Russia as well as those who survived and died here in the United States. Our next bits of ethnic heritage are going to come from Alina Kleen, who currently, at this very moment, is teaching her Polish culture class, and so she can't be here. But due to the wonderful resources that we have at the FLTC here at Wayne State University, she was able to record herself presenting her section of the information, which will be presented to you now. This one right.
Hello everybody, my name is Agnieszka and I teach Polish language and culture and also Polish and Yugoslavian film at the Department of Classical and Modern Languages, Literatures and Cultures. Today, right now, I'm teaching Polish culture and that's why I'm not able to be with you in person. Our project is supposed to be about stories. We believe that stories are really what make places, building more interesting, more significant to us, especially these stories which capture experiences of the ethnic communities are interesting to all of us, but especially to the representatives of these ethnic communities. For the Polish part of the project, we identified 3 places. They are the monument to Tadeusz Kościuszko, located downtown. All of them, as a matter of fact, are located downtown. The second place is the Ambassador Bridge, and the third place is Coleman Young Municipal Building. On purpose, we decided to stay away from historical Polish neighborhoods, such as the neighborhoods on the east side, Hamtramck, Poltown, the neighborhood around St. Stanislav Church and St. Adalbert Church, and also on the west side, that would be the neighborhood down Michigan Avenue and Michigan and Junction, Michigan and Livernois. We did that, although these are very, very important neighborhoods for the Polish community. We decided to, as I said, stay within downtown Detroit.
As it was mentioned before, we identified 3 places for the Polish-American part of the pilot project. And the first place is a monument to the Polish general Tadeusz Kościuszko. While looking at the monument of Kościuszko, some obvious questions come to mind. Who was this individual? Why was he honored with such a spectacular monument? I believe it's one of the largest monuments in the city. And who was instrumental in erecting the monument? Each of these questions could lead to a story, or rather to multiple stories. The first story might be the story of a Polish patriot born in 1746 in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, who was very well educated as a military engineer in France, suffered a romantic heartbreak in Poland, left his homeland, and in France volunteered to fight in the American Revolutionary War. During his impeccable 7-year-long military service, Kościuszko built numerous fortifications at Saratoga and West Point, among others, and in 1783, in appreciation of his service, Congress promoted him to the rank of Brigadier General. A year later, Kościuszko left the US to fight for Poland's independence from Russia. In 1794, he led the unsuccessful national uprising. This defeat led to the third and final partition of Poland. In his lifetime, Kościuszko returned to the States, but died in Switzerland in 1817. In his will, Kościuszko ordered that the American estate he received as a payment for his military service was sold, and the profits from the sale were used to help the slaves from his estate start new lives. Sadly, his wishes were not carried out. The second story connected with the monument could be the story of the monument itself. There are many places in the States and in the world commemorating the freedom fighter for 2 continents, as Kościuszko is known. The Detroit Monument is a replica of the monument standing by Wawel Castle in Kraków, Poland. The Kraków Monument, erected in 1900s, was destroyed by the Nazis in 1940 and was recreated and given to the city of Kraków by the German city of Dresden in 1960. The Detroit Monument, as we can read on the commemorative plaques in Polish and English, was a gift of the people of Kraków, made to Detroit in 1978 to commemorate the United States bicentennial. It is interesting how both currently existing monuments are gifts of a community to a community, German to Polish and Polish to American, respectively. Some Polish Americans who participated in the big endeavor erecting the Detroit Monument most certainly are still alive, and their stories should also become a part of the project. This will also allow for showcasing some of the Polish American organizations which have long traditions of working on behalf of Polish Americans. The other 2 items, which I will cover briefly, are the Ambassador Bridge and the Coleman Young Municipal Center. Why the Ambassador Bridge? The building of the bridge was an enormous enterprise when it started in 1927, with many individuals and companies involved in it. One of the consulting engineers for the bridge was a Pole, Ralph Modjeski. In his lifetime, Ralph Modjeski, as chief engineer, built nearly 40 bridges in North America and is known as a pioneer of suspension bridges. Among his constructions are the San Francisco-Oakland Bridge, built in 1936, and the Blue Water Bridge, built in 1938. Ralph Modjeski was born in Austria-occupied Poland in 1861 as a son of the most famous Polish stage actress, Helena Modrzejewska. In 1876, his famous mother, together with a group of Polish intellectuals and writers, came to the US seeking freedom and a fresh start, and nourishing the pipe dream of living off the land. For that purpose, they purchased a ranch in California. As the group did not know much about farming, the experiment failed, and after a year of struggle, Helena Modrzejewska decided to go back to what she knew how to do the best, acting. Under a shortened, Americanized name Modjeska, the then 37-year-old actress restarted her stage career. In a matter of a few years, due to her enormous talent, beauty, and perseverance, Helena became a famous American actress, especially appreciated for her Shakespearean roles. Helena Modrzejewska must have performed in Detroit. At this point, we know that she performed in the Upper Peninsula in Calumet in 1906, as she toured the US multiple times in the 1880s. The places where she performed and the stories about her Detroit engagements will also become a part of our project. So we have the story of Ralph Modjeski, a famous builder of bridges, and his contribution to the Ambassador Bridge. But an important thread woven into his story is the story of his famous mother. And our third place identified for this pilot project is the Coleman Young Municipal Center, built between 1951 and 54. Why? Because one of the mayors of the city of Detroit was a Polish-American, Roman Gribbs. Born in 1925 of Polish immigrants, Gribbs was the mayor of Detroit from 1970 to 1974. He was succeeded by Coleman Young, who was the mayor of Detroit until 1993. Judge Gribbs is still active professionally, currently lives in Northville, and we hope to interview him for this project. His story has to be a fascinating tale of his path to become mayor, of the different city Detroit was back then, and of the circumstances under which he decided that he didn't want to seek re-election.
These were just 3 places, and the stories generated by them, and we just scratched the surface.
So, my name is Sangeetha Gopalkrishnan, and I'm the director of the Foreign Language Technology Center. So after hearing all these exciting possibilities and most interesting stories, the questions are, so what is the scope and scale of our project? How do we complete our project? And when do we complete our project? And can we even do it in this lifetime? So, as Julie mentioned, we started about a year ago. Julie's presentation at FLTC was almost exactly a year ago, and we had our first meeting in April last year. And in this past year, we've spent a lot of most of the time analyzing. So if we conceptualize our project as having 5 phases: analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation, I think the last year we've spent a lot of time in analysis. We started with some really broad goals. These are in no particular order. And we've spent a lot of the time last year looking to see how we can accomplish these goals. We wanted to obviously familiarize ourselves with the layer software and see if we did develop an app for Detroit, or a version for the Detroit project, what kind of functionality would it have? Obviously, we wanted to develop a work plan and create a timeline and identify the stories, the case study areas. We also wanted to create partnerships both within the university and in the community and have conversations. And we also knew early on that we needed funding, obviously. And we also needed a lot of help with this project. That we needed to hire, we didn't envision ourselves sitting down and developing an app. So, so these were some of our goals that we had when we started a year ago. In terms of, so we also had some specific goals. We wanted to meet regularly as a group, and we've done that. We wanted to explore funding, research, and publication opportunities, and we did that. We applied for funding for a humanities working center group, and we wanted to present in the series, and that's done. So now we're back to identifying the scope and the scale of our project. So one of the conversations we had early on was with the key individual responsible for one of the key individuals responsible for the German Traces of New York City project. Now she is the librarian of the Goethe Institute in New York City. We had a Skype chat with her, and we asked her to talk about their project. So she talked about the scope and scale of their project, their funding, which was a lot, the technical complexity. Then she described their timeline in detail, and the number of people that worked on the project. So we had a really good, we learned a lot from that conversation. We knew what we wanted to do was a very complex undertaking, and we needed to, I think all 6 of us felt that we wanted to, that we could sit around at a table and talk endlessly about stories and possibilities and toss around ideas, but we wanted to have something concrete and do it in the near future and not have this as the work of our lifetime. So we decided we would do a pilot that would help us figure out what time, resource, and budgetary implications there are. So for our pilot project, we have identified various phases, as you can see. The first thing was to determine the scope and scale. And as my co-presenters indicated, we already identified about 6 or 7 places of interest. We're still figuring out is it going to be 6 or 9, but I think we have we've shortlisted the places of interest we want to include. We also decided we would start with just downtown Detroit, and then we could scale further. In the target audience, we have already identified, Julie mentioned. So between May and August, we hope to embark on the design and development aspect of our project. So which means we'll have to research the content more thoroughly that are associated with these places of interest, gather all the stories, the audio material and the video material, and we also, as Julie mentioned, we do want to use it in the classroom. So our target audience, it includes students. So we want to create activities for students for instruction. But let me back up here a bit. When we determined the scope and scale of the pilot, Julie mentioned that she showed you the layers and the augmented reality. And when we spoke to Brigitte at the Goethe Institute in New York City, developing the app itself, we learned is going to be a rather complex undertaking at the moment. So what we want to do for our pilot is develop the stories on the website. So they have a platform called as Geo Storyteller, and we can essentially assemble our content and upload it into the platform. So at least the stories will be available on the website. The app itself, we will do it as an extension. Julie, you want to do that?
I just want to say that then the Geo Storyteller platform is accessible within the Layer app. So we wouldn't have our own app like Israel has, but you would be able to go through Layer, search for us, and find us on an app. So we wouldn't have our own special app that you could find like in the App Store.
So then at the end of fall, I went way past our. So by the end of the summer, we hope to finish the development aspect of these of our pilot, And then we want to implement our project in the fall in the classrooms and also make it available to other members of our target audience. And hopefully we want to evaluate our project by the end of December. So we have a very concrete plan. And obviously, before we can start on our pilot, we need funding. So anybody knows of a big pot of money anywhere? And we want to hire student workers also by May, and as Krista also said, if students are interested in working on our project, contact us. And we hope next year around this time to be able to present the results of our pilot in the same, at the same venue at a brown bag session. So those are so we have a really very concrete plan, and we're hoping that we're going to have all these stories up. And Laura's going to talk a little bit more about our next steps.
Okay, so what we envision overall is first that we'll finish this pilot segment that Sangeetha just discussed, hopefully by the fall, and we can start implementing it in the fall. And the pilot again is just the German, Polish, and Russian places of interest. And then we're going to come up with, and of course I wrote complete project, I know Sangeetha would say not complete, because we don't really see on the one hand that this will ever be complete, that we could keep developing this and keep working on it. On the other hand, we're going to try to have some sort of concrete number of sites that we want to put up in the app and have a completion date for that. Again, for German, Polish, and Russian sites, just for these three. And at this point, we'd be working more in downtown Detroit, but we'd also start moving through those concentric circles to areas beyond Detroit. And then after that, we would have additional projects. We're not overly ambitious at all. No. But first of all, we would have our project, which could be, of course, enhanced as we learn more information. As time goes on, more things that are present will become history. So indefinitely things could be added on to the Polish, German, and Russian original project. But we also hope that there will be other groups within and outside of the university who would be interested in exploring other ethnic communities in the area and other ethnic cultures that have influenced and been influenced by Detroit, and we would be we plan to share our templates with them and our collected wisdom, of which we hope to have an awful lot by then. Yes. Okay. And now I guess we can open it up for questions. Yes?
Yeah, this is a very exciting program. If for no other reason that it seems to be so visual, and the ability to convey images of the University of Detroit and the Outer Rings. It's so exciting. And I was wondering, but it seems like to be a project that's infinitely expandable, and I think that's both a curse and a benefit. Because, as you say, you want to do this for the rest of your life, you probably have to spend some more time on it. But I was wondering, I'm particularly interested in that part you got to at the very end there, where you started to talk about other potential participants or partners beyond the borders of Europe. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit more, what, if any, mechanisms or plans for how to incorporate that to the benefit of the overall project.
I mean, first of all, we're from a language department that has many more language and cultures represented, and I think that that's where we would start. But there's already been so much interest generated by other organizations in the community that it could take off on its own, I think, in many different directions. But the Detroit Historical Society, who else has been interested here? There's a lot of different, a lot of people, students, and other faculty members that could develop it.
And hopefully, we'll do the legwork of figuring out all the technology. The nice thing about Geos Veritas is you can create templates, and we can make all that available to historical societies or university projects, or even maybe K-12 projects, and they can use that to upload their own history. So it would be a very sort of open activity. It wouldn't necessarily be something always coming from the university, but hopefully would be available to all people interested in presenting their history.
Would this end up being kind of like a patentable product or something like that, that you could,
Make money on it?
I guess that's, you know, we're always hearing from the physicists and the chemists here at Wayne about their patents, but I wonder if the greatest benefit of it could be something that is without too much trouble and
Right,
too much
right.
of a, you guys are experiencing the curve, the steep curve, and something that could enhance its expansion into the other many and diverse communities that make up the metropolitan area.
When we spoke to Brigitte Dürl-Gast at NYC, their emphasis was on creating this material so they can share, that people, they wanted it to be open, they wanted it to be free, they wanted it to be easy access so people can build and create and that the project grows. So that's why they have created this storyteller, geo-storyteller platform that we can essentially use. So they spent a lot of the money and the time. You know, they had a really, they mentioned easily $65,000 to $100,000. So they created this platform. So they've done the work, and then they partnered with also the Pratt Institute of Information and Library Sciences. So they have this very philanthropic, open-minded sort of a goal that they want to create, allow everybody to create their own stories and upload it, sort of.
And I think also that we would hopefully be getting funding from organizations, and probably those organizations would assume that this would be open to the community to use without any cost, I think.
I wonder if the Library of Congress has any sources of money for this sort of thing.
National Endowment for Humanities.
So yes, we would love to hear ideas for
There's an access and preservation, specifically a grant that it might actually, you'll have to read the, I know the specifics offhand, that might actually work. I'm in the School of Library and Information Science, so if there's any way that I can be helpful to you, let me know. I actually have my students I teach in digital libraries, digital preservation, the beginning cataloging course, and what's the other, metadata. And so I have my students use images from the Reuther archive to try to beef up the metadata, because essentially all they did was use undergraduate students to write down the label that was on the folder for the images, because they got the Detroit News, their whole photo archive, you know, literally hundreds of thousands of images. And so I have my students go in and work on those, and it's incredibly difficult. So I'm wondering how you're actually going to get students to research this material, and where you're going to send them to, and all of that, because I have a very difficult time getting graduate students to actually do this work. And in some cases, I'm having the students do this project 3 times throughout the semester. And to get them to provide really rich information is a struggle. So that's, you know, I'd like to hear what you're going to do for that.
Maybe we would like to invite you to come and talk to one of our, at our next group meeting or an upcoming one. Maybe we can talk in detail with you and then figure out what strategies.
I think that would be really helpful.
I don't
for
think
me
we have
and
any
for
right
you.
now. We're learning.
Yeah, the other issue was the usability of this app. So if you're walking around and you have one of these, or would it also apply to, say, a smartphone? And would there be like a little notification, like, hey, this is, yeah. And then what type of, are you using a form to collect data? Are you know, I'm thinking about how are you collecting this information? What type of, do you say, we want 3 images? We want a, you know, a title, a creator, a date of activity, or I'm really curious about that whole information being the data, metadata, cataloging individual that I am, because that might help, right?
I think that's a great point you bring up. When you look at the German Traces New York City, their website, all their stories have this template. They have visuals, they have a certain story, the stories are similar in length, the audio is similar in length. So we'd have to have some kind of a template for that kind of data collection. Definitely, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think working on the pilot will help us kind of
Yes.
yeah, get an idea as to what exactly we're looking to do.
Can I go? Okay. My name is Dr. Singh, and I'm with engineering. I've been living in Detroit for the last 32 years now, especially I live next door. And I think I briefly see what your projects are, but my question and concern would be, I mean, our objective may be in one form or the other to improve the city of Detroit. One thing I notice is that what Detroit needs is, apart from other things, is the top schools. So we do not have any top school in the city. And let's say, for example, if anybody comes, even a new faculty member comes, or even a new GTA comes, the first question they ask is where to go. Okay, where to find the best schools? Because I will not live in Detroit, I will move outside Detroit, where the schools are best. Somehow, I've been finding that during 32 years, we have not been able to have good school in Detroit, or even Maine State's effort, which probably you can very easily contribute in your lifetime, so that we can have at least a top-notch school at Wayne State from kindergarten up to high school. That will help having more population here, more teachers here, people living in this thing. Another thing which I noticed is the number of homelessness for the last all these years is increasing. There are 20,000 homeless people in this city, which are not even 200 yards from you. Okay, but people generally talk, but I have not seen any efforts being made by anybody so that we can say that, you know, the city, the homelessness from Detroit should be eradicated or even reduced. But then most of the time, whenever these questions are raised, people say, we don't have money, or we don't have resources, some of those things. But I have been recently to Dubai, and when I was a student in high school, I was thinking that, I mean, there is nothing grows in these cities, I mean, like Dubai, etc. It is all desert. But astonishingly, during between 5 to 10 years, I mean, that city has become much better than what we see in the top cities in America. I mean, those people can live from desert to, you know, to a world-class top city during 5-10 years. What are the reasons that we are unable to improve Detroit during all these years, and not there is probably any hope? So my only, suggestion is, but the projects, whatever you are doing, they are great, but your efforts could also be in this direction, so that we could improve the image of Detroit, city of Detroit, schools in Detroit, and even the homelessness of Detroit.
Well, I think those are some great ideas to keep in mind. So far, we haven't necessarily thought directly about these issues, but it's something we can definitely keep in mind as we
And there's avenues for outreach in the community.
Definitely.
But certainly, I think anything that helps people find valuable things in the city of Detroit is going to help it in the long run.
True. You had a question? Oh, sorry, Walter.
No, sure. No.
I work at the Ruther Library, so I'm very glad that we're both here. I'd encourage you to come to us to research, and also if you do conduct your own oral histories, think about depositing those in our archive for future researchers to use. And please talk to us, talk to the School of Library Information Science, so that this stuff is accessible to everybody.
Definitely. Thank you.
Just a quick observation and then an offer. It seems really that there's some interesting tension between doing something more immediate that's more like text on a platform, as opposed to the sort of more ambitious sort of virtual reality discussion. And I've had this with a recent film student, undergraduate or graduate from Wayne State that's now at the New School, about the sort of virtual reality where your camera roves and you get a replication of the same place years before.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of chosen gaps. I think that the gaps are going to be the big choices that you guys are going to have to make along the way. But it's a very exciting project, and I'd also be really interested in offering honors student population as part of that project.
Great. Thank you. All right. So, if any of you have any more ideas, you think of something, that please feel free to write to us. We're welcoming of all ideas.
Also, before you go, as you see what wonderful work working groups can do. I think the Humanities Center is proudest of our working groups because, in fact, the working groups represent in a small way the sort of heart and soul of the center. What we are trying to do is to bring faculty and students together collaboratively across disciplines. And here you have an interdisciplinary group of people working and connecting. There is an engineer in here, there's a librarian here, there are historians here, there's anthropologists here, working together on this. So if you know of if you have an idea and you can think of faculty across disciplines within your department. Most departments now are interdisciplinary, so that you can get people within your department who are from different areas. But if you can cross the traditional departmental boundaries and work together, we don't give a lot of funding, but you see, you can still get wonderful ideas. So please consider applying for this. And I would be remiss if I did not invite you to sign up for our Brownback series next year. We are recruiting right now. You will see often 2 or 3 more times before the 26th of April. I will be populating your inbox with invitations to, right, you see? Follow the leader. You just signed up, and we're looking for people to sign up for our Brownback series. You don't have to have a polished project, and you see you get interdisciplinary input, and you can use this venue to try out new ideas, get input from your colleagues, and refine them. If you're going to give a talk at a conference, sign up and give a brown bag like 2 weeks or so before, and you get to practice that talk, work out the kinks and everything. And more importantly, you get an opportunity to collaborate and meet people who might be working in an area similar to yours, but not within your own department. And often the departments get so isolated because people are busy. You don't know that if you're a literary scholar, you don't know that there's a historian working in a cognate area from whose ideas might benefit your work. But in a forum like this, if we try to advertise across the university, people will come, and we've made many connections in this way. So these and also we are reaching out across to other universities. People in the University of Windsor have been participating. People from Oakland University are interested in participating. So if you know a colleague in a neighboring university who might want to come and present, just forward the advertisement to him or her and invite him or her to sign up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.